Hi guys, so today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. I only read 4 books in April. April was a month. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Let's just jump into some statistics. So for April, I read 1,740 pages. I read 1 contemporary, 1 historical fiction, 1 horror, and 1 sci-fi, so we had a lot of variety this month. Last month. Oh, I'm so confused. There was 1 3.5-star rating, 2 4-star ratings, and 1 5-star rating, so as far as the ratings go, it was actually a pretty decent reading month. I just didn't read a lot. All 4 of the books that I read were physical editions. 1 was an adult and 3 of them were young adult, and 3 of them I borrowed from the library and 1 was off of my personally owned TBR. 1 was a 2010 release, 2 were 2015, and then 1 was a 2019 new release. So let's just jump into what I read and what I thought of them. The first book that I finished in April was The Red Queen by Philippa Gregory. I'm sure a lot of you guys know who this author is. She's like the queen of historical fiction. So The Red Queen is technically, I think, the 3rd book in like a really long series that she has, but I don't think you necessarily have to read them in order. But this book runs parallel to The White Queen, which is the 2nd book in that series. And basically, I'm not very good at like European history or any kind of history in general actually, but I'm going to try my best to explain the story, and I feel like it's easiest just to explain like the Red Queen and the White Queen at the same time. So if I understood correctly, in English history, there was this king, and the direct line to the throne was the Lancaster family, but then there was a cousin family, which was the Yorks, and for whatever reason, I can't really remember, they were both like fighting for the throne and the right to the throne. So in the Red Queen, we follow Margaret, who is a descendant of the Lancaster family, and in the White Queen, we follow a descendant of the York family. So yeah, that's the best like description of this story that I have. So it's historical fiction, but it's based on fact. I maybe should have mentioned that first. But yeah, I've always wanted to pick up this series. I've known about it for like a really long time, because I used to watch, before I even knew BookTube existed, I used to watch Elle Fowler, and she had this series called Glitteratures where she would basically review books, and one of the series that she talked about a lot was this one. So I've wanted to pick it up for a long time. I actually own both the Red Queen and the White Queen. It wasn't until I was like a decent way into this book that I read that you should probably start with the White Queen first, but whatever. So as well as being excited to pick up this book, I was equally kind of nervous because I read some reviews and some people were saying that they felt like they were reading like a history book like for school. I did not feel that way at all. I think the main thing that separated this from like any kind of history book was that it's told in first person. I don't know how many history books you've read in school that were first person, but I feel like that would have made it so much more interesting because you just feel so much more invested or connected to the character when it's told through their own point of view. And like I said, I'm aware that this is like, it's fiction, but it's based on fact, so obviously we don't know like the exact interactions that these characters had with each other because there's like a dialogue in this and we don't know what they actually said, but it definitely made you feel more for the character. And like this is like kind of a tragic story because literally the only point of the main character in this is just to produce an heir. Like she doesn't actually get to like become queen or anything. She's just there to have a son so that he can become king. And yeah, her life is kind of really tragic and you feel really sorry for her, but at the same time, she is like a sort of morally gray character. Like she does some things that aren't necessarily the nicest, and so, but you get where she's coming from when she does those things. I almost just fell over. I don't know if you saw that. I'm not sure that I'm doing so well at describing this book, but as far as like the plot goes or like my actual personal rating on it, which usually I say first, but I didn't do it this time, I gave this 3.5 stars because while I found this to be like a pretty interesting story, it isn't the most interesting. Even in school, I never really cared about American history. That bored me to absolute death, and I didn't really care about European history either. I mainly, I always took a liking to Egyptian history and like Greek and Roman and Egyptian mythology. That was like my favorite thing to learn about in history class. This kind of stuff never really interested me, and I did find it more interesting because, like I said, with it told in first person, you just get more of a feel for the story and an understanding for what was going on, but still it wasn't the most interesting story. I definitely found myself bored at times while reading this book, and I also wasn't super like invested in the characters. While I do feel for the character, I never found myself really caring what happened. But yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars. I liked it enough that I will probably continue on with some of the author's other works. I definitely plan to read The White Queen because I heard that that one was a little bit better than this one, and I just want to see where like the other half of the story went. And yeah, that's basically my thoughts on this book. Next book that I finished in April was Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is the first book in a sci-fi slash dystopian trilogy. I'm like super late to the game with reading this book because I never had an interest in reading this book ever, and then for whatever reason within the last month or so I just got this like little inkling to pick it up, and I did, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I feel so stupid for waiting so long to read this book because I feel like I missed out on like being able to discuss it with everyone else because I feel like this is a thing of the past now. Although I hear that they're apparently releasing, I think it's going to be like a novella or like a side story to this series that's being released this year. But yeah, this book, I don't really know how to explain a plot to you. I feel like even when I've heard other people talk about this on their channels, they've never really explained a plot either because I went into this completely blind. Like I had no idea what this was actually about outside of it being sci-fi. And of course you've probably heard that it is told in like a mixed media format, so it's told through like messages and documents and surveillance footage and stuff like that, which actually makes it a really quick and fun read. It's like really fast paced, which is nice. While I did give it a 5 stars, there was a few things that I thought could have been done a little bit better. For one, I was just kind of confused about the overall plot. Like this does take place way in the future, but it never really explains how we got from here to the way society is in this book. And also because it's told a lot through like messages and stuff like that, I sometimes found myself being a little disconnected from the story, but because it was told through messages, I felt I was even more connected to the characters. We mainly follow 2 characters, and the thing that I loved about their dynamic was that there was like a little bit of a romance in this because the 2 characters were together, but in this book they're like broken up, but even the way they're talking there's like the romantic tension, and it's so great. But I'm always looking for a story because I love romance in books, but I feel like I want to see more romance where the characters are already together when the book starts, because you can skip over the whole like falling in love way too fast and the insta love and just the drama and stuff like that. Like I just want to see the characters when they're already together. That's like the romance that I like. And so even though they were like broken up in this book, I liked that they already knew each other, they had already been together, like it was already a thing. And while at times I did find the plot to be a little bit confusing, there was a particular aspect of the plot that I really liked, and I don't think I realized until reading this book how much I actually like that storyline in books and movies, and that's like artificial intelligence when it becomes too intelligent and it starts like taking over. This had a artificial intelligence in it called Aiden, I think, and it reminded me so much of, okay, this is gonna sound crazy, but there was a TV show back in the 70s called The Bionic Woman. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I've seen every single episode, and while I'm not like a huge fan of the TV show or something like that, my mom liked a lot, so I watched it all the time as a kid because she would watch it. There's this one particular episode of The Bionic Woman that was called Doomsday, and it was about this artificial intelligence called Alex, sound a little bit familiar, and he became too intelligent and he was going to start a nuclear war, and so the Bionic Woman had to try and stop him. And I don't know why, but I just really like that storyline. I find that to be like really creepy because if you think about it, that's like where the world is coming with like Siri and stuff like soon, or Alexa. What's with all the A names? But yeah, basically what that whole story was about was that I really liked that element of the plot. So yeah, that's probably enough about this book. I just really enjoyed it, if you couldn't tell. Next book that I finished was Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. This is a collection of YA horror stories by a bunch of different authors. Some of them I have read before, some of them I haven't. If you've been watching my channel for any point of time, you might know that I'm not the biggest fan of like short story collections or anthologies of any kind, because usually I feel like in order for me to be invested in a plot or invested in characters, it has to be longer than whatever the short story is, because I just can't get that into it that fast. However, I make the exception with horror because I feel like horror or thrillers or mysteries, they're just so much more engaging a lot quicker, if that makes sense. So even in this like short, like 30-40 page stories, you can get invested in them so much quicker, and thusly I can enjoy them. I hope that makes sense, because even I started to get confused by the end of what I was saying. So while I was reading this, I actually rated each individual story, and so I've got it written down on my laptop, so I thought I would actually go through each story and just give you like a brief little thing about what I thought about each one. So the first story was The Birds of Azalea Street, which I gave 1 out of 5 stars. So this did not start off very well for me, but it did get a lot better from there. The Birds of Azalea Street, it was based on a couple of different things, but one of them was The Birds, the movie by Alfred Hitchcock. I watched the movie before, and I haven't seen it in years, so I can't really give my opinion on what I think of it now, but besides the fact that both of those things had birds in them, I didn't really see how they related at all. So I didn't really like that story. But the next one is In the Forest Dark and Deep, and this is by Carrie Ryan. I have read a book by Carrie Ryan before. I think she wrote Daughter in Deep Silence, which was a mystery story that I think I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Like, it was pretty good. But this book was based off of Alice in Wonderland, and this is the one that I feel like whenever I've heard people talk about this anthology, they have specifically mentioned this one when talking about it, that it was like particularly scary. And while I think that it was a very creepy take on Alice in Wonderland, it was kind of underwhelming, because maybe I thought it would be scarier than it was. So yeah, it was good. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, but it wasn't... It was underwhelming, basically. The next one is Emmeline by Kat Winters. This I gave 3.5 stars. This is like a little historical one that I thought was really good. And then the next one is Verse, Chorus, Verse by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is one of my favorite authors, so when I started reading this book, I was very excited for it. And for the most part, I did really enjoy it, but I didn't feel like it wrapped up that well. I feel like it kind of lost itself as the story went on. So I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I liked it, but I was very disappointed by it, to be honest. The next story was called Hide and Seek, and this is by Megan Shepherd. This I also gave a 1 out of 5 stars. I didn't like this at all. I feel like it was extremely unrealistic and kind of rushed. Like, for the story that it was, I think it needed to be a full novel in order for it to be good, because just in like 30 pages or so, there was not enough. Next one was The Dark Scary Parts and All by Danielle Page. This it says I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I'll be honest, I cannot remember what this one is about at all. I'm going to quickly refer back to my novel and see if I see the characters, if I can remember what the heck it was about. Okay, I just flipped through a couple pages of the story, and I still don't remember like most of it, but I kind of remembered the gist of what it was, so I give it 3 out of 5 stars, but let's just say it was a forgettable story because I forgot. The next one was The Flicker, The Fingers, The Beat, The Sigh by April Genevieve, something I can't pronounce. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. It was actually very creepy, and it mostly just came down to like the last like 2 pages or so. The way that it wrapped up was what really pulled it all together. The next one was called Fat Girl with a Knife by Jonathan Mayberry. This is another one that I gave 1 out of 5 stars. This is like a zombie story. I did not like it at all. The next one was Sleepless by Jay Kristoff, and this I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Like, weird saying that I enjoyed something because it was actually very disturbing, but it was good for what it was. I don't know if saying I enjoyed it is really the best word. I was really impressed with this one. I think I actually posted about it on my Instagram story right after I read it, because that was how impressed I was, because it's only like 35 pages, but somehow he managed to fit like 3 different plot twists in 35 pages, and each one shocked me, but it didn't feel like too rushed or packed together or unnatural or anything like that. Like, it felt right in 35 pages, which, like I said when I already went on my rant about anthologies, is really weird for me to like it that much. So yeah. The next one was called M by Stephen Bachman, I think, and I also gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This was, I think it was historical fiction, but it reminded me a lot of Agatha Christie's, like, And Then There Were None, or like just specifically Agatha Christie's way of writing, where it's just like a really edge of your seat kind of mystery, like a murder mystery kind of thing. And I really liked it. And also the main character in it is blind, which I don't know if like the representation was done correctly, but I thought that that was interesting in the story, and that character specifically reminded me, which I also think I mentioned on my Instagram story, reminded me of a character from a Doctor Who episode called The Crimson Horror, because there is a character in there who is blind, and I just pictured that girl the entire time that I was reading this story. The next one was The Girl Without a Face by Marie Lu, which I have read a book by Marie Lu before and I really liked it, but that was dystopian and this is horror, so they're very different genres. I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. Just a trigger warning for everything, like if you, like specifically self-harm, it was very heavy on that, and yeah, it was just kind of very disturbing, but I didn't find it to be particularly interesting or like scary. It was just more of like a shock factor kind of thing. The next one is A Girl Who Dreamed of Snow by McCormick Templeman, I think. I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars as well, and once again, I do not remember what this book was about. So yeah. The next one was Stitches by A.G. Howard, and this I also gave 5 out of 5 stars, and this might be my favorite story that was in this anthology. This was just very, very creepy, but in the best way possible. Unfortunately, because it's a short story and a horror, which I think everyone should go into blind, I can't tell you much about what it was about, but I'll just say it was disturbing, it was creepy, it was great. I liked it a lot. And the last one was On the I-5 by Kendare Blake. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and once again, I honestly can't really remember what it was about. So, also unforgettable, but apparently I liked it at the time. Yeah, that was my unnecessarily long review of this book. Maybe I should have just done its own separate review because I feel like this video is going to be like a million hours long now. But in the end, as far as like an overall rating goes, because obviously the ratings went all the way from 1 star to 5 star, I ended up settling on a 4-star rating, which probably doesn't seem like it averaged out that well, but these like 5-star ones I really, really liked, and so I'm giving it 4 stars overall. And the final book that I read in April was Fame, Fate, and the First Kiss by Casey West. This follows our main character Lacey, and she has finally got like her big break. She's starring in this zombie movie alongside Hollywood's like hottest young male actor, and at the same time she's trying to get through high school, so her dad is hiring a lot of tutors, and they're not really lasting that long because Lacey's not the easiest to deal with. So her dad ends up hiring a boy her age, which at first she doesn't really like, but then, spoiler alert, romance ensues. This was Casey West's newest release, and since reading this, it means I have officially read every single book that Casey West has ever written, except for her short story in that Snow and Love collection. For some reason, my library didn't carry it at Christmas, so I didn't get to read that one yet. But I have read every single one of her books, and I've pretty much enjoyed every single one, some more than others. And I'd have to say, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, but this was probably one of her not as great novels. I've even seen some other people review this novel, and these are people that like, they agree with my opinions. Like for the most part, they've always liked Casey West books as well, but they did not like this book. And I have to agree that like, if I was to rate this technically, it wouldn't be a very good book. Like, it didn't really have a plot to it. I feel like in every Casey West novel, there's like the main kind of romancy plot, which is always kind of mundane, like it's not that interesting besides the fact that it's cute, but there's always like some kind of like little mystery side to it. So like in this one, Lacey thinks that someone's trying to sabotage her like movie break because things are like going missing and stuff, and they're blaming her and whatever. That like mystery, the way it wrapped up was so anticlimactic, it was almost hilarious. On a technical rating, this was not a very good book. However, it kept me very entertained, and it was just like a very enjoyable read. I wouldn't even say that it was very entertaining, but it was just very enjoyable. And this is gonna sound really cheesy, but like while I was reading this book, I found myself just being fully relaxed, which is not something that happens often. Like, you know when people describe like what relaxes you at the end of the day, and they're like, I read a good book. Like, I've never found reading, as much as I love it, I've never found it to be a particularly relaxing activity. Like, it takes a lot of my brain power to read, and so it's not that relaxing for me. Whereas with this, because it's so like nothing's really happening, it didn't take much at all for me to read this book and like shut off half my brain and just chill for a while. And that's what I rate my books off of, is my enjoyment level and how it made me feel. And this made me feel happy and relaxed, and it was just a nice time to read it. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but technically it wasn't that great of a book. So take that and do with it what you would. So those are all of the books that I read in April. I feel like this was a really long wrap up considering I only read 4 books, but for some reason I decided to go really in depth into all of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?